this afternoon, we are going to talk about the mechanics of filmmaking, and we are very, very fortunate to have some of the top editors at Sundance joining us this afternoon for this conversation, which is entitled Editors on Editors. Now, where did we come up with that name? Well, I'll tell you. We have an iconic series that you may have seen called Actors on Actors that has won several Emmys on PBS, and you can certainly watch the series on Variety.com. So please welcome to the stage Angelique Jackson, Variety's Senior Entertainment Editor.
Thank you so much, Dea. Yes. And thank you for joining us for these amazing conversations. I am Angelique Jackson, and I will be leading the first of these Editor on Editors panels, if you will. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring up our two editors. So first, joining me, the editor of Heightened Scrutiny, Emelie Mahdavian. And then joining us next is Bryan Mason, who edited Jimpa.
You don't get a table for your water.
That's okay. We got somewhere to put it.
Well, thank you guys so much for this conversation. I'm so glad to have you both here because in a way we're kind of representing, at least in these two films, we have documentary, we have narrative, but at the end of the day, editing kind of is editing. Editing is one of the key parts of storytelling. So I guess I'll just kind of quickly start. How your experience kind of led you to these two projects. Emelie, I'll start with, I'm sorry.
Oh.
You were trying to throw it to Bryan.
Well, his experience is probably much more interesting. He's got all kinds of juicy bits, probably.
Uh-oh.
Whereas mine was, I was looking for an editing job and I got hired, which is sometimes how it begins, right?
That's the hope, yes.
And then if you're lucky, it turns out to be what you hope that it is, which is that you have that connection with your director, that you feel that there's something in the story that that you can add to it, that you can give something. And so that's where I found myself, fortunately. And now at the end of the whole process, still friends with my director, and really proud of the film.
I actually do love that too as well. We're still in partnership at the time of release. What about you, Bryan? I think you guys are still in partnership.
Yeah. Well, speaking of partnerships, Sophie Hyde, the director of Jimpa, is my partner, and our kid is in the film. So it's our kind of I don't know. We've made so many things together. I think it's our 5th or 6th film we've made that's been lucky enough to come to Sundance, and. So yeah, when Soph kind of was writing this script, it was in lockdown in 2020, and we talked about who was going to work on it, and she asked me to cut it, which was lovely. So our partnership is also ongoing, and we premiered here last night, and it was really exciting. As you were saying, you hope what you're working on and what you make is going to reach an audience and connect, and it's so nice to get to this point where you get to share it, because you're kind of working on it in small dark rooms for a long time, and then you step into there's lights and people and everyone's watching the thing you've been making, and you hope that it connects and they kind of vibe on it, and it so far so good. Yeah.
Was there a particular moment at the premiere where you kind of had the flashback to being in the dark room in one particular scene or edit or moment, and you were like, oh good, the audience did go with that?
To be fair, we finished the film last Friday, so there wasn't that far to flashback.
I'm literally still in the dark room.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like we're still making it. Yeah. Yeah, we checked the DCP last Friday and got on a plane on the Monday to come here. So, yeah, that's I think that's not an unusual Sundance experience.
No, I don't think it's as unusual as we think it is, because I saw them. She was nodding. Yep, we just checked our DCP 2 weeks ago. We picture locked on Christmas Eve. I think a lot, you end up, you're like, oh, we got in, we got to finish.
Yeah. Yeah, we were so stoked to get in, but it meant we kind of had 3 months worth of post to do in about 4 weeks. So
yeah.
it was a crazy, busy 4 weeks. Yeah.
Well, we're gonna come back to that part because I'm curious. Similarly for you, Emelie, when you kind of log picture on this one, what kind of stood out to you about the experience of, obviously doc filmmaking, and in this case, I got a chance to speak to you for our Varieties Doc Dream series, but that was something you directed. So you were in service of kind of your own vision. This one, you're just ensuring you're still friends with the director at the end.
Well, not just that.
Not just that.
But yeah, but it's true, because I think like when you also direct and then you're editing for somebody else, like you do have this very clear sense that that my role here is in service of their vision, right? Like I'm not here to kind of make an Emelie film. Like I'm here to make Sam's film the best that it can be, like offer whatever I can. And so then, if I offer 2 ideas and one of them is what Sam wants or neither is, like that's what rules in the end. But for us, the last shoot day was on December 4th at the Supreme Court. So the footage, we were locking in reels, and the footage was coming in, and so the opening of the film and the closing of the film, and it hasn't premiered yet, so I don't want to give anything away, but like basically about I think 17 minutes of the finished film was shot then, and so we were really like going on what had we planned, what did we think we were going to get, but this was observational footage, and there were these couple moments where it was sort of like a gut thing of like, let's try this or let's try that, and it just gelled. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing it again, because I've sort of got to step away, and I did leave with that kind of good feeling of like, in the end, we got those last bits that we needed to really tie up what feels like a topical, relevant, really important film. Like we got those beats for our character. I hope everyone agrees with me.
Well, tell me a little bit about that process and that idea of storytelling, because in when you're having kind of observational filmmaking of that sort, you, just like you said, don't know how this story is going to end until 20 days before you're locking it. How did your framework and the conversations you were having with Sam about what this narrative was going to be, what the story was going to look like, how it was going to change over the shoot, what was your experience of that?
Well, when I came on, it was an interview-based film. And so I watched all these interviews. And so there was a really, like, a huge thing that kind of took place across the summer into the fall, which is that the verite storyline became the spine of the film. And then there was a lot of work to think about, what was the really essential bits we couldn't lose, because those interviews were giving us important context, right? They were the interview. If we had lost that, I think we would have fallen back into a type of doc that's very familiar, that's just kind of like, here's our hero and root for them. And we wanted something more complex than that. So there was a lot of work to rethink the story arc. But I think generally or at least this is my experience, is like when you're working in observational film, I think audiences that are general audiences maybe assume that you just kind of show up every day like they do with their phone for YouTube or something, and that you just like, but whatever happens, I'll film it. But of course, that's not it. I mean, you've been thinking for potentially years about these themes and these issues, and you have ideas about how it may transpire, and then like you talk to your characters about what they're going to do and what it feels like. So you can narrow it to a certain extent, but I think there's always little human details. It's kind of akin to the fiction thing, like the bits that an actor adds that become the thing that really give you the beat that might not have been the dialogue in the script or whatever. Like in doc, I think we have that, which is like these little human twitches or gestures and moments or something that they say that just is improvised that actually tells you everything, right? And that's what you're, in the end, looking for, that you cannot plan for.
And you hope you can stay open enough while you're cutting to like let those moments shine, whether it's even like in fiction, it's even before action is called or after cut is called and the camera's still rolling, and there's a look, we can use that look at this moment and that's really going to finish that scene or whatever it is. And you hope you can just in the cut stay kind of open and live and flexible enough to kind of let the material present itself. Yeah.
Did you have one of those in this? I'm sure you had many of those in this cut, but one that you could tell us about.
I think that the most fascinating thing about Jimpa is it's rich with flashbacks. There's like about 70 flashbacks woven through the film, and finding how they were going to work in the story was definitely the hardest journey in the edit. Obviously with drama, you have a script, so you have a blueprint, as opposed to doc where you have a hope of where it's going to go. And we always cut that to the script first, but the flashbacks were shot with the idea that they were going to weave in somehow through the film. So that was a fascinating process from day 2 of the edit all the way till the end of the sound mix, when we kind of finished with the score and the sound design, and sort of all of the elements come together, and finally it was like, oh, that's how they work. Okay, good. We weren't sure until we got right to the end, and it was like, okay, yeah, no, they actually settled, and they revealed that they ended up being these tiny moments that you cut to, but they reveal like a depth and a kind of complexity of backstory and history that you just glimpse at. And when they work so well. But it took us a while to find that. Yeah.
Well, a while, but it's really more, day 2 to day 28.
Yeah, well, with only more. I don't think we could have cut the film in day 28. More like, I think we were cutting for 12 weeks, so whatever that equivalent, 60 days maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, let's not do math up here.
I agree.
But tell me a little bit about that idea of, like you were saying, when you have this kind of heightened timeline to pull this together, what was the key for you in this form of collaboration? I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, you've been on this film since it was in the script phase, but then, when you do realize, okay, we're going to have to cut this together quicker than maybe we presumed we would, what was some of that shorthand maybe that helped you all get to that finish line?
Yeah, I mean, that's where the history that Soph and I share as director-editor really comes to, because we understand each other's sensibilities really well. So there's still plenty to discover, but what we don't need to discover is how to talk to each other or how to communicate ideas to each other. That's understood and that's happening. And then really it's holding your nerve in a way, like finding the things that you like about the film and the cut and how it's evolving. And even if you're getting feedback from investors and other people, you have to listen to that, of course. But if it starts to kind of cut against what you think the strength of the story or the moment or the scene is, holding your nerve to kind of back the director and back your own instinct on what is going to work. Yeah.
I actually am curious about that idea for both of you, because you have all been doing this in so many different circumstances and with so many different collaborators. What is kind of your best piece of advice for editors on really getting comfortable, with your own instincts and communicating those to your filmmaker, if you are not also the director, and just also navigating that kind of like delicate balance that you have there?
Yeah, I mean, if you're an editor for hire, particularly if you're in the situation where you don't have that relationship that's long established in terms of communication, I mean, I think there's all the kind of practical things that we could talk about, and like the development of your taste, and like and you kind of gaining confidence in the areas that you're good at. But I would say, like, I think it's really important to hopefully find yourself in a position of being on a project where you have a director whose vision you believe in, right? Where you think your director has something to say and knows how they want to say it. And then it's about, like, to me, it's like be a whole human being, right? Like show up as a whole person and try to recognize that everyone else in the room is that too. Because I think we end up sometimes with these horror stories or these trauma stories that come out of some of the processes of filmmaking that are really just people not being their best selves. And so much of, particularly when you have a crunch for time, or like if you're editing something that's personal, that, I think these are things we had in common, right? Or you're editing, things that, like, maybe you feel in the political crosshairs at that moment. Like, the last thing that you need is your collaborators not being on your side. And so I think remembering as an editor that, like, it's also really hard to be a director. And so I want to try as much as I can to be there to offer myself, but then also to serve that vision and to just be me and try to not create conflict, basically. To me, creativity doesn't operate well in a space of conflict.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that, and I think that you use the word try. That's my big thing. Is like you just try. Like it's easy in an edit if someone has an idea and you go, oh no, that's not going to work, or I don't think that'll work. It's like, yeah, that sucks. Like to be that guy. Like, just
don't
try
do that.
it. You know, it's like, and it's amazing if you just kind of go, yeah, okay, let's try that. Like, even if I don't think it's going to work, you try, and it almost always leads to somewhere better than the idea, that even the first idea they had. Because in trying it, you see something else, you're like, oh, maybe we could go there with that. And it's so that's my, if I'm gonna give advice,
because we all see things in our heads, right? And like we can execute them, but we're all seeing our own film in our heads. And like ultimately, if it's the director's vision that you're in service of, like maybe you see something and when you try that, they love it and they take it on. Maybe they don't. Maybe that doesn't match their vision. Maybe there's something that you can't see it till you do try it. So to me, it's like, play. Like why would you not? You know, it's not going to take weeks. Like just put it together and see if it works. And then I find then I grow in those moments of trying to do something that's beyond how I would have done it.
Yeah, and the project grows, right? Because
project
you
grows,
start
absolutely.
to find other ways that the material presents. You're like, oh, okay, we can go down that path with this scene, and that's exciting.
I mean, Sam and I have very different like filmmaking approaches and very different ways of thinking sometimes about story. Which makes it sound like maybe we like couldn't have worked well together, but it was really the reverse, because it was like, oh wow, yeah, that's really interesting how you did that. Like, and so I feel as if like I'm working with somebody where I respect them and I'm learning things from them, and then I have something that I can offer. That feels like a great collaboration. So yeah, try, don't fight.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going back to the flashbacks, Sophie was so keen on the flashbacks in the film. There was a point earlier I was like, I just don't know that they're working. Like, and the scenes, like we sort of had cut the scenes without the flashbacks, and so many of them were rich and working really well. I was like, I think these flashbacks are going to interrupt. Like, I don't, like, there was just a moment there, and I had to just kind of step back and be like, no, of course, Soph like really wants these to be in the film and really believes in them. So okay, let's keep trying, like, and keep trying, and then they started landing, and it was just like, oh, I'm so glad we kept trying.
Yeah. Do you remember the first one that you put back in when you kind of had that realization?
The first flashbacks in the film are when we introduced this character, Richard, and who's Jim's assistant, and that little sequence of flashbacks has probably the most versions of iterations across the edit. And yeah, they came in and went out and came in and went out. And then it was kind of when we landed that sequence, it was late in the process, but it was one of those things that until that was in flux, and it kind of had me a little nervous about how we were going to finish the film. And when that landed, I was like, okay, yeah, we're going to get there. We'll be all right.
Emelie, what about for you? What was something that you tried that ultimately, you know, that Sam was into?
I think so I have a more background as a filmmaker in verite. So that when the film started going that direction, I was like, oh, I'm definitely, you're going to be glad I'm here. I have something I can offer you. But like I said, it was how does that live with the interviews? Like, how do we build, a film that makes sense and sets up all these worlds that we're going to be in? And so the film opens with verite, and that I think was something where I felt like, oh, I can see an opening here. And I remember it was like sort of late. I'm based outside London. Sam's in New York, and I have to shout out to my amazing assistant editor, Nancy, who's in LA. Nancy is really amazing, and like we kept like a 24-hour clock going in order to finish this film because we basically used our time difference. And so anyway, so we were like doing that, and it was sort of the end of my day. It was like 30 minutes to the end of my day, and there was like something that Sam was wanting, and it wasn't quite clicking, and I was like, I think I see it. Do you want me to just try something? And it was like, okay, it worked. And that ended up being how we opened the film, was with those things that we were doing in that moment. We were just like, we were kind of fighting it. And then it was like, no, it's there. I know it's there. And then it was like, aha. And it clicked. And it's a beautiful opening, and it's a quiet opening that gives us our characters, that makes it about the humanity of these people in a story that ultimately is like, so... where the stakes are so high for so many people that it really is a risk that that you never get back to the intimate and the human.
It's one of those things where they say that, to make something very universal, you kind of have to start very, intimate and individual and remind us all that just how much we are all alike. And also, yes, please, more shout outs to our assistant editors, because it is a village. It is a team. All right. Well, I want to say thank you both for this insight into your process, and we're going to keep these conversations going. So now I'm going to let you, Emelie and Bryan, go, and we're going to welcome up Megan Keane, who is the Director of Product Marketing for Adobe Pro Video.